There's very few things that seem to make sense in the Bay Area. Building is definitely one of them.
Yes.
Why is that?
The market price of a finished product is $1,600 to $1,700 a square foot. So if you can build that product for $400 or $500 a square foot, that spread between $500 to $1,600 is the equity that is instantly made by somebody.
Give me a sample of how much someone would purchase either a lot or a home for, construction costs, and then potentially the equity created.
In a good city, you could fetch for the finished product, let's say $1,500. So let's say you've built the home that's 2,000 square feet. So now $3 million for the land, $1 million for the building construction, total of $4 million, and now the finished product sells for $5 million. So that $1 million is the equity that you've generated.
You want to match the level of the house so that it comps better. So that would be like an 8x return on your money.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining and jumping on the show today, Kamal.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Kamal, we're sitting in your beautiful custom home. I want to know, were you an engineer, project manager in the tech life?
I was an engineer, started out as an engineer, then did my MBA, became a product manager, and then here we are. Now I build custom homes.
Okay, so how do you go from product manager, which I mean, I guess technically is you're managing the product through its life cycle, into custom home building? What's that story like?
Yeah, what happened is my wife and I bought this piece of land and we did what everyone else does. We hired an architect, we got our plans done, we got our plans through permitting, then we hired a general contractor and we gave him the job. And he started building it. At that point, I was still working in high tech. I had no idea how homes are built, how construction is done. And I started seeing some issues. I saw that it took him 4 months to build a foundation. I saw that his communication was very poor. I saw that his record keeping was abysmal. He lost stuff. He invoiced me wrongly and he was always searching for stuff. So I started paying attention to all these things, and now I call them contractor red flags. But I started paying attention to these things, and also I would, after work, I would be at the job site and I would see that nothing was getting done. Then I would be here in the morning before going to work and I saw that nobody was working, nothing was getting done. So again, initially I didn't understand construction, but I started using simple logic and I started saying, if work is not getting done and I'm still paying the mortgage, eventually I'll run out of money.
Yeah.
And if work is not getting done, this house will never get built. So after seeing this for a couple months, I basically asked him to sign a termination agreement, terminated the contract with him, and then I hired another contractor because even now I didn't think that I knew how to do construction. And now I was watching more keenly for red flags, and this time I saw similar red flags, so I fired him in 1 month. And by this time I said, look, I managed billion-dollar projects for these companies that I work for. This can't be so hard. And I started with the determination to learn what I needed to learn, and I built the rest of the home myself. From the foundation was already done, but everything else I built on my own.
And with this house?
This particular house.
Okay,
yes.
And how long ago was that?
This was about 10 years ago.
Okay, so you learned how to be a builder just because you had two previous builders who didn't do so well, and you said, well, I can MacGyver the rest. Okay, and then at that time, what were the resources that are available? Did you have a mentor? Did you have someone else that you were...
Nope, there were no mentors. I learned by watching stuff on YouTube. I learned on the internet. I dug deep into building codes. I found information on different websites, city websites, state websites, and each time I needed something, I dug deep and figured things out. The other thing is I paid attention. Normally, when you're getting something done, you don't pay attention to what's in the building plans. What I would do here is, for this project, this was basically my first project and an ambitious project as a budding contractor. So what I started doing is, when the workers were looking at the plans, rather than just being zoned out or looking at my phone, I would ask them, I would say, you have this large sheet of paper in front of you, 24 inches by 36 inches. What exactly are you looking at? What are you learning from this piece of paper? What information are you seeking? So that gave me an idea of what each person looks for. What is the foundation guy looking at? What's the framing guy looking at? When the building inspector is here, what's the building inspector looking at? So it forced me to understand, out of all this information, what's critical.
Yeah.
So by learning the critical stuff, I was able to start understanding and learning.
Yeah.
The other thing as a product manager is, a product manager gets requirements from customers. Requirements end up in documents, which they have certain names. And then the product manager follows those documents. Those documents become a specification. Same thing for a home. For a home, you get your building plans done and your building building plan is a specification. And then you follow the specification. The building inspector is here to make sure you're following the specification and you get the home done.
So in essence, a product manager is a builder.
A product manager is a builder, and essentially a builder is also a product manager. They just don't know it.
Yeah, and they're just building different products.
And you're building different products. Every home, every ADU I build is a separate custom product of its own. No two are alike.
Yeah. Okay. And then this was, again, how long ago?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. After you built this house, how long did it take for you to switch from tech product manager to builder?
While building this home and while unpacking all the details, I also realized this is an opportunity. If this is how contractors behave, I have just fired 2 contractors, and if this is how they behave, there's an opportunity in there. So my mind started saying, okay, I need to become a builder to overcome these issues and to provide my customers with a much better experience. So I already started thinking along those lines while building this home. So it took me a year to make that switch. It took me a year to understand what I needed to understand, to get my license, appear for the exams that are needed. And by the end of that year, I was a full-time builder.
Okay, interesting. And then I guess for the audience's sake, to kind of relate it back, not everyone has the confidence to go ahead and become a builder, but from an investing perspective, at least for me, there's very few things that seem to make sense in the Bay Area. Building is definitely one of them.
Yes.
Why is that?
Yeah, in the business, we have something that we call a spread. So let's say, and you guys have all access to the websites like Zillow and Redfin. It's easy for us to check what's the market price of a finished product, and that's often determined by the city. So let's say in this city, the market price of a finished product is $1,600 to $1,700 a square foot. So if you can build that product for $400 or $500 a square foot, that spread between $500 to $1,600 is the equity that is instantly made by somebody, by a builder if you're building a spec home, or by the end customer if he or she is getting a home built.
In short, it is flipping, but on a much bigger scale.
Yes, yes.
Because if you were to buy a flip at, I don't know, let's say $500 a square foot, put in $250 a square foot for construction, but then only sell for $1,000 a square foot, you have a $250 margin.
You made $250 margin.
But if you're in an area and you're developing that has a $2,000 a square foot, all of a sudden, it's crazy margins.
The spread is many times what you get as a flipper. However, the other side of it is a flipper is in and out very quickly. They're in and out in a matter of months. When you're building on a piece of land like this one, where nothing existed, your holding period is much longer. But you get to create a lot more value because you're turning literally dirt into a finished product.
And then I think as it gets more interesting, especially with SB9
Yes.
passing, and you can split lots and build more houses and sell off ADUs and all of this stuff. Obviously, was that, I mean, I guess SB9 was more recent. So this, all the custom home building and the ADUs, this just was icing on the cake for you when you saw that.
Exactly. Through my journey of this particular home, I acquired the skills, I got my license, and then as I saw ADUs become interesting, I launched a separate company that only does ADU design, ADU permitting, ADU construction. So just by having the right skill set, I was able to leverage all those skills to get into the ADU business. Now that SB9 is happening, we are also doing SB9. We are doing lot splits per SB9 specification. We work with several cities and we get that done.
Yeah.
So the same set of skills that I've leveraged in multiple areas.
Because it's essentially the same process. You just get the design, get the approvals by the city.
Exactly.
And then you just build. Exactly. And the customer, obviously, on the custom side, is a little more nitpicky, but that's just another part of the requirements.
Exactly. From my perspective, it's just a different set of requirements and we have to meet those. SB9, you have to do a lot of things in the design phase. We have to meet those, and we do that. From a construction part, we are covered. We know how to do that.
Let's run through a couple scenarios just to make these investments tangible.
Yes.
Obviously, the preferred location to do it will be up the peninsula. So give me a sample of how much someone would purchase either a lot or a home for, construction costs, and then potentially the equity created.
Sure, absolutely. When this home was built, the numbers were very different because it was 10 years ago. Let's talk about current projects in cities with good dollar per square foot numbers for the finished product. So in a good city, you could fetch $1,500 to $1,600 or $1,700 a square foot for the finished product. Let's say $1,500.
Yeah.
So let's say $1,500. So you buy a piece of land, let's say for $3 million. You build a home on it, let's say for $1 million. SB9, we'll come to it later. Let's say you build a home for $1 million. So let's say you've built the home that's 2,000 square feet. The finished product of that home will approach 5 million or so in a good zip code. So now 3 million for the land, 1 million for the building construction, total of 4 million. And now the finished product sells for 5 million. So that 1 million is the equity that you've generated.
And I think 3 million is a very conservative number, especially if you're going to buy a tear down house. I think you can find those, it's crazy to say, the Bay Area is crazy where you can find those for $2 million and not 3 million. Well, then you count the million of financing costs. But yeah, that is, I don't know, the quote unquote fastest way. But yeah, you can make $1 million in equity in how long? 18 months? 2 years?
1 year for permits, 1 year for construction. And then you accelerate this. Now you build an ADU. So now you're adding equity to your piggy bank, but you're not buying land anymore because you own that land. So now you've built an ADU without buying land anymore. So your dollar per square foot number is very different. Now you did an SB9. So now you've built another home on that lot and the dollar per square foot number is very different because you already own the land.
So if an ADU would cost you $300,000-$400,000 to build, because you build a very nice one, because you want to match the level of the house so that it comps better.
Yes.
But if that ADU was, what do you think? Is that a 1,200 square foot, a 1,500 square foot ADU?
1,200 square foot ADU, yeah.
Okay, which then at $2,000 a square foot is how much?
2.4 million.
There you go.
Yep.
So that would be like an 8x return on your money.
Exactly. That's why this is a gold mine. Once you have that piece of land, you can keep doing these things and keep adding.
The fun part too is as you start to build that and the equity is there, I know that for right now, the exits of SB9, lot splitting ADU, selling off the ADU by itself is still unknown.
Yes.
But from a bank appraisal and potentially cash out refi perspective, that means you could generate this nest egg, this bank for yourself, and maybe it doesn't appraise that 2.4, but if it appraises for over $1 million, you're in it for 3, you've still created a solid nest egg to then refinance from and be able to deploy more capital on other projects.
Exactly. And we also see that some of the bank programs are more ADU friendly.
Yeah.
So when they calculate loan to value ratios, they assume that the ADU is already built. So they're more favorable to homeowners who want to build ADUs. The other thing we are seeing is this can actually change people's lives. I have a customer for whom we first built an ADU, then we did a garage conversion. Now we're building an SB9 unit. He's going to be generating about $12,000, $13,000 a month in rental income. And he's an executive in a high-tech company. And his mental model is if he can generate $20,000 a month in passive income, he will quit his job that he hates. He has a big title, but he hates his job. He'll quit that. So now he's looking for another piece of property that he can buy, and we'll repeat the same thing. So I've done this with him 3 times already on one piece of property. Now he's finding the next piece of property to repeat all this. That'll get him to $22,000 a month of passive income. And then he's ready to retire at a young age from a job that he hates. So this actually is life-changing for people.
In this bubble,
yes,
in the Bay Area, where you have high income earners who can afford to buy some of these lots, a $2 million lot, which ordinarily, if you were just to live in it, and that's all you did, and now you're forking out 15, 16, 18 grand a month just for a roof over your head.
Yes.
It's kind of crazy.
It's crazy. And it's scary. And I'll tell you why it's scary. All this thing is financed by one job.
Yeah.
You lose that job. And if you're on the edge, you lose that job in 3 months, you're looking at a whole bunch of trouble.
Yeah. 6 months, you're out 100 grand. It's scary.
And if you don't have what financial planners talk about, 6 months of paycheck in the bank.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, you're in pretty big trouble.
But obviously, as SB9 comes into play, and you're now building beautiful second, quote unquote, third, fourth homes on these places, it doesn't feel like an apartment if you were to rent it out. It's an actual home in a nice neighborhood that gets premium rent compared to some of these apartments.
Absolutely. And we've built in high net worth zip codes, right? We've built in Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills. And when we build these, whether these are SB9 homes or ADUs, when we build these and we keep the original design and elevations of the existing home in mind, what we build complements the existing home, doesn't take away from it. So it adds value, it increases your net worth, and it gets you that cash flow every month.
And then as you talk about ADUs, what's the difference? Why should someone go custom versus prefab?
Yeah, you can get prefab ADUs. What we hear from a lot of customers, and we've worked with prefab ADU vendors. We built foundations for them. We did utility connections for them. I know how they think. A lot of our customers came to us and said, oh, we want to build a prefab ADUs, and we worked with some of these vendors. Customers often have this myth in their head that prefab ADUs are cheaper. They also think that they're the same quality as what you can build custom. The challenge we see is in most of the prefab ADUs, you can't customize anything. You can't change anything. So if the ADU vendor is offering you a black and white scheme in a kitchen, that's what you get. Some of them do offer you a color palette and offer you some options, but there's always a limitation on what you can do. Whereas fully custom, you basically can do anything. You can even change window sizes after you start building. We certainly have to do extra work, submit revised plans for approval, but you can change window sizes if you need to. We've changed doors into balconies when the ADU is a 2-story ADU. In a prefab, it's very hard to do. And if you are able to do it, it's very expensive, far more expensive than it is if it's all custom.
Gotcha. Okay. Obviously, there's a lot of hidden things that aren't discussed necessarily. Leave that to the marketing guys, who I guess did a good job.
Absolutely. Marketing guys, a lot of these companies, and again, I'm not bashing any particular company, but if you double click and do some searches, you'll find the details. A lot of these companies have had a lot of financial trouble because they were run by marketing guys. Some were started by architects, and they had not run a business before, and they got some venture money, and they hired a bunch of salespeople. The salespeople got a bunch of orders very quickly. The marketing was solid, sales was solid. They got a bunch of orders. They couldn't deliver because they didn't know how to build fast enough, or they had issues after that. After they start building and constructing and taking these to the market, they had issues. So we've had a bunch of these companies. I don't know if recently you may have heard, if one of these companies took large amounts of money up front from customers. Now they're in trouble. Their license has been revoked. So be careful who you work with. We've seen issues with some of these companies.
How about let's just say, from an investor perspective, working with a contractor, how do you want investors to approach? Because obviously, everyone's going to try and get multiple bids, as they should.
Yes.
But in a world where you're also working on, you can only handle X amount of projects at a time.
Yes.
You can't handle everyone's projects.
Yes.
If an investor also wants to put their best foot forward to try and win business, what should they do?
Yeah, what we do, by the way, we try to understand the investor upfront and early on. And if we see that this investor only cares about the cheapest bid, we try to disengage quickly. We do the opposite of what a lot of contractors do. We try to get out of it because this person will end up working with the cheapest guy who will have the cheapest bid, and they'll eventually get into trouble because there are some people who will take advantage of that mindset. What we tell the investors is, number one, we'll give you an honest bid. Number two, our bid will be very complete and very thorough, so there'll be no surprises later on.
Okay.
Number three, don't just worry about the cheapest bid, but worry about the reliability of the number somebody's giving you. We're giving you an honest number. If we exceed that by even a penny, we'll give you 5% of the project value back. So whatever the contract price is, we'll give 5% back if we exceed our cost by even a penny, the construction cost. So it's not about the number from an investor's perspective. You have to find someone who's reliable, who'll work within a schedule, who'll work within the budget. Otherwise, it's going to hurt really bad when somebody throws a small number, knows that you'll salivate over it and you'll take it, and later on you'll get into trouble with that.
Yeah, there'll be how many change orders later.
Change orders and surprises and all that. And by that time, you're out of money. It's not going to be pleasant. So reliability is something a lot of investors don't think about. They think about the lowest cost to build, but that only leads you down a troubled path.
Okay, the next question is, if I'm an investor or looking to obviously purchase a house, when should I try and flip the home versus tearing it down and building something?
If you think the project has a lot of foundational defects, if you think you'll end up spending a ton of money moving every wall, and moving certain walls is cheaper than moving certain other walls. Moving anything structural is much more expensive. Moving a load-bearing wall, that's a structural wall, is very expensive, but a non-load-bearing wall, not a problem. You can move it very easily. You have to dig down into details of what you're trying to do. If there are lots of foundational defects, if you're moving a lot of structural walls, let's say you have a small home and you want to turn it into a big home and you want to move all the external walls, and then inside the home looks like a bunch of pigeonholes or pigeon boxes, and you want to have open big rooms and you want to move a bunch of internal walls as well, you might as well tear down and rebuild. It'll be cheaper, quicker, easier than trying to move all these walls. So it all depends on the project. The more changes you're going to make, the better it would be to just break it and start from scratch.
Yeah, obviously, I'm sure there's people like you who can go out there and give your opinion on which one you should go
Absolutely.
with. Okay, how about let's go into, as I think about levels of investing, I feel like the big custom home building or developing, say, a row of townhomes ends up being a next level up, right? After that, you have your big apartment high-rise buildings and skyscrapers, and that's another level.
Yes.
But if someone wanted to get into either the custom home building or these townhouse developments that people are doing, what is the blueprint for the normal average investor to now upgrade? What pieces do I need in place to, say, build 6 townhomes?
For a typical custom home builder, you have your team in place. You have an architect, you have a builder, you have all the engineers that are required. When you build a row of townhomes, it's a different ball game. Different set of laws will apply. The city looks at it differently. The city may impose additional rules such as dedicating some of the units to low-cost housing. So those things a custom home builder doesn't think of, or a one-time investor doesn't think of. And then when you're building these multiple townhomes, your neighbors may complain, your neighboring businesses may complain. We've seen projects like these that actually got shut down because neighbors complained. So it's a different ball game. In our team, we also have an expert who deals with this particular area. That's how we're able to build these projects, because we know how to deal with the state laws, we know how to deal with cities pushing back, so we know how to get it done. But it's a different ball game, and you have to think differently if you're an investor into these type of projects.
Yeah. And again, trying to think of what could work in the Bay Area. Those are one of the few ways that can work. There's just a year of planning that has to go into place.
Absolutely. So in your financial model, you have to account for it. So as you're doing your P&L and as you're looking at your exit, you have to account for that holding period. Otherwise, your numbers will be off.
And then for you, the next step, obviously, you're in the builder phase. The developer phase would now be to purchase the project and raise all the funds. Is that a desire for you?
Absolutely. That's a desire for me, because that's how you can scale. And once we have these skills in place, as well as the teamwork in place to get things designed and permitted, that's just the next natural phase for us, the natural evolution, which is instead of building one unit at a time, start to build multiple units at a time.
Yeah, and then obviously if there's only a limited amount of lots and homes in, say, Los Altos Hills that you can get, but as you look in some of these other areas where affordable housing is a little more necessary, could you run me through what a sample margin might, say, let's pick, I'm building 6 townhomes again, somewhere in Menlo Park or Daly City. What would that cost?
Got it. Yeah. So there are a couple of roles one can play. You can play the role of the developer, in which you own the numbers and you bring the builder to build for you. So that's one model you can play. The other model you can play is you're the developer and the builder both. So if I were doing it, that's likely to be my model, because I don't need to hire a builder. I can do the building myself. And so your margins are different in both cases. If you're a builder, you're lucky if you can get 20-25% margins, gross margins. If you're a developer, you likely will get much higher margins, because you're able to sell the finished product. As the developer only, I don't get to sell the product, I get to build the product.
Yeah.
That's why the margins are very different.
Interesting. But obviously, if you were the builder developer, now you get to play on both ends of it.
I get to play on both ends, and the margins are much better.
So say hypothetically we ever partnered together, how much capital would I ever have to bring to the table? And obviously an idea and a project under contract, but would it be $1 million, $2 million to the table to execute on a project? And then obviously put some bank financing on top of it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And we already have spreadsheets with all this information. We'll be happy to share those with any prospects you may have. What you do is, and let's assume this model is based on bank financing. So a bank looks at this project, and here's what a bank looks at. The bank looks at basically 3 different factors. They look at soft costs, and I'll tell you in a minute what soft costs are. They look at hard costs, and they look at any costs you deal with during the holding period.
Yeah.
So let's double click on these. Soft costs, what you'll be paying all the engineers, what you'll be paying the architect. Basically, before the builder, lifts a hammer, those are costs that you already have paid. That includes all the permitting fees, all the city fees. Those are all soft costs. They fall into that bucket. The holding costs are the interest you'll be paying to the lender during the entire period of permitting as well as construction. And the other part of the holding costs is you'll also be paying tax on that property, and tax also will vary depending on where you are. You're paying for a piece piece of land upfront, then as you keep constructing, you'll be paying for some degree of finished product, so your tax will go up as well. So that's the second element. The third element is the hard cost, which is the construction cost. So when you look at a model like this, you add up all these costs and the land acquisition costs, you add up all these costs. The bank wants you to have skin in the game. They typically want you to have 20 to 30% of this total cost that you're putting down. That's your equity. So if you walk away from the project or the project fails, the bank gets to keep that money. So that's the down payment you have to make pretty much on a project like this. But we've done this many times. We have spreadsheets that have all this stuff broken out so we can quickly look at a project and starting with the acquisition price of the land and going to the comms and figuring out how much the finished product will sell for, we can figure out if the numbers make any sense.
That's interesting. Yeah, for me, as I just think about, and I've had a lot of shiny object syndrome in my investing, right? Out-of-state long-term investments and Airbnbs. Then we did the syndication. We actually just closed on a care home yesterday in Fresno.
Awesome.
But I think about what's the amount of effort and work required, what's the capital we have to put in, and then how fast is the exit model, and then how secure is it?
Sure.
On the flipping side, those margins, a couple $100,000 in profit looks great, but the margins really aren't that big.
Yes.
With the amount of capital that they have to put into acquire and construction costs. The developer side, at least from what I've learned from you, hanging out with you for the last 6 months, as well as some other friends, is that there's so much more baked in margin in it. You just have to be a little bit more patient.
Yes.
But it seems to be more financially secure, more stable.
Yes.
And so that's why it's interesting to think about how to move on to more that side of the investment side.
Let's talk about a couple of the things too. When the margins are slim, when you're doing a flip, for example, when the margins are slim and if the market turns against you, you get hurt very quickly. On the developer builder side, margins are much fatter. Even if the market turns against you, you can pivot to a hold and rent model for a year or two and then exit, or you can exit with slimmer margins, but you'll still make money. So that's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is a lot of flippers are making changes and sometimes making structural changes without any permits. So they'll end up selling the product, somebody will buy it, and if it ever has an accident or it even, let's say, catches fire, the first thing insurance companies will do is to try to get out of it. They don't want to pay. They're insurance companies, but they don't want to pay. So they will go back to the building department, they'll start checking for permits, and they'll find that this was a flip, there were no permits involved. They basically will deny the claim. Then the homeowner will come after whoever did the work. So that can cause a lot of trouble as well. When we do construction from the ground up, or we do additions, or we build ADUs, we're always working with permits, so this problem doesn't happen. A flipper may think they're saving a little bit of money by not going down this route of permits, but when it hits you big time, because we're not talking about a $10,000, $20,000 fine, it could be many millions of dollars of a lawsuit. So that's the other thing to think about.
Okay. It looks like I have some more studying and some research to do. Kamal, if somebody wants to learn more about building a custom home or has a product, how can they reach out to you?
Look at our YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Kamal the Builder. Certainly look us up on YouTube, and we always provide our contact information as well as information about our ADU company and the custom home building company with our YouTube videos. So that's a great place to find us. And then we have websites, of course. So come in and look for us on YouTube and also on our websites.
Perfect. And of course, I will leave all of that linked down below. And by the way, just to have some fun, if you made it this far in the video, can you comment custom home in the comments below? I'll know that we're best friends. And then if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe. And if you know anyone who's thinking about building an ADU or building a custom home, please share this video with them. But Kamal, I appreciate you teaching me a little bit about how to be a developer, and I'm excited maybe trying to do a project together one day.
Let's work on it. Looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Josh.
Mike, cheers.
Cheers.